I also have the pleasure of welcoming today our guests. I'll start with Steve Boland and let him introduce himself and our other guest.
Thanks very much, Dan. My name is Steve Boland. I run an organization called Next in Nonprofits, and I focus on trying to do next generation fundraising and communications development for nonprofit organizations, including using all the tools we're going to talk about today, which is how I met Peter Ratcliffe. So let me introduce the co-director of the Eastside Freedom Library, Peter.
Hi, everyone. So the Eastside Freedom Library is a year-old nonprofit, 501c3, based on the east side of St. Paul. We've taken over a historic Carnegie Library and have been successful in getting some grants, but grants that required a dollar-for-dollar match. And so with Steve's help, we've used crowdfunding and GiveMN twice to make the matches, once with a Cultural Star grant from the City of St. Paul, and now more recently with the Knight Arts Challenge grant from the John L. and James S. Knight Foundation. So I'm here to say it can work, and as someone who is not a techie, to try to help you get up the courage to give it a try.
Perfect. Well, welcome to both of you, and thanks for being here. Our agenda today, as we promised in the description, is really to look at some of the basics of crowdfunding for organizations, how to really get going and decide if you're going to do a campaign, how to think about your best donors and really figure out how to turn them into fundraising champions. We've got a little bit of technical background here from the GiveMN side, but we're really going to rely heavily on Steve and Peter to talk about what it means as an organization leader to embrace this kind of a campaign and to think about how you talk with your donors and get that going, and where it intersects with the program that you're doing every day. Because, you know, as we know, the good work of the organization doesn't stop to make time for fundraising. So we're going to talk about how to kind of juggle some of those things and make this as easy as possible to engage as many people as possible. So the first thing we want to look at is just a little bit of background on crowdfunding for organizations. You know, online giving keeps growing. This is something that we know pretty well here at GiveMN, but the data nationwide is backing it up. In 2014, online giving grew 4 times the rate of overall giving. You know, giving does continue to increase, and we see, you know, an improving economy, allowing more and more people to give generously, but they're doing it more and more online than ever before. And with platforms like Kickstarter, which is a little bit, I guess, a little bit hard for nonprofits to use once in a while. It's primarily for sort of some small business ventures, but they're raising over $500 million every year for crowdfunding projects online. So I think it is kind of fun to think about the sheer number of dollars that are flowing through online sites.
I think it's important to put that in context too, then, that a lot of organizations that I work with think about, let's go for that big foundation grant, let's you know, try and get money that way. And as Peter said, when you get those, they often come with match requirements or other issues. But if you think about the likely players you'll go to in the state of Minnesota to get money to support your mission, the McKnight Foundation had a really good year based on the earnings that they were able to do in their most recent report, and they did, you know, $80 million in funding, which is amazing and huge, and now dwarfed by what's happening in crowdfunding at $500 million from one platform. And, you know, Kickstarter has been traditionally used by more for-profit institutions. There are some nonprofits, but add Indiegogo, add GiveMN, add all these others, and there's real potential to access many, many, many individuals, and I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, we do see that peer-to-peer giving is increasing year over year. From 2013 to 2014, even with all those great statistics for online giving, the dollars that are being realized through peer-to-peer giving pages has increased exponentially versus sort of the traditional giving page where a message is sent from a nonprofit, you know, click here to make your gift. And it's kind of the same page all the time. It's kind of the same message year-round. That's growing, but not growing nearly at the rate that peer-to-peer fundraising is, which is why we're here today to teach all of you a little bit more about how to do it. So we know that it works. We know from the data that it takes, you know, if you look at what it takes to get a single donation online, it takes only 4 email solicitations, or 1 in 4 peer-to-peer email solicitations results in a gift. 1 in 1,250 email solicitations from an organization's voice results in a gift. And so we know that you respond better when your family asks you to do something, when your friends ask you to do something, than if I were to ask you to do something right now over the phone. So think about what relationships mean in your organization, what relationships mean between your donors, and start thinking about that as you build a crowdfunding campaign. So there are about 5 things here that Steve has outlined for us that are really important to make a crowdfunding campaign work.
Okay. So let me walk through those 5, because I think defining crowdfunding different from any other kind of fundraising you may do using GiveMN or any other tactics is important as you think about this, so you get a board of directors person that goes, wow, I heard about this great crowdfunding campaign, we should do that. And there may be really good reasons to do that, or maybe not, but you need to define what's fundraising and what's crowdfunding. So the first one is to fund a specific thing, not general operating, not just regular annual supports or campaigns, that you're really trying to get something that will either get done or it won't get done, and it helps people feel like you're not just coming in saying, please in general support our work, but rather this particular thing. Now in the case of the Eastside Freedom Library, there were 2 projects that we've now done this with that are specifics, and Peter, you want to take just a second to talk about what those goals were?
So the first one was to make the match for a City of St. Paul Cultural Star grant to replace the roof on this beautiful but aging building, and their standard approach is that you have to make a dollar-for-dollar match. So that was last summer. We were really a brand new organization. We started the minute we took control of the building, and we got over 300 individual donations, many of which were $10 and $25, but it gave us a chance as a new organization to build a set of relationships with the neighborhood that we wanted to connect with. And again, and maybe we'll talk more about this as we go on, this was done through organizing teams and having people asking their own contacts to make donations. The second campaign was the first go-round of the Night Arts Challenge. We received a grant for $25,000 to commission art by neighborhood immigrants as a way of kind of rebranding the building as being a building that was going to be a welcoming space for new immigrants on the east side. And we needed to make a dollar-for-dollar match for that as well. And we have just completed at the end of June making that match.
Yep. So the first thing, it's got to be a specific measurable ending goal that you can point to. Then next is that there needs to be some urgency around this, which is why most crowdfunding campaigns tend to have about a 30-day lifespan from public announcement to finish of the campaign, which isn't to say that it all happens in 30 days, but that's sort of the public face of it, is 30 days of please get those donations in, or something happens, and that's kind of the urgency piece. If we fail to meet this STAR grant match, we lose the grant, we can't do the roof replacement. If we don't match the Knight Foundation money within a certain time frame, we lose that opportunity, can't do this thing. Whatever the consequence of the crowdfunding is, there needs to be something at the other end that says, act now. Don't think about this too long. We really need you to get on board. The visual that we have here is from one of the emails sent out during that first campaign, where people had heard from us, but we could really honestly tell them, one last push, brothers and sisters, this is it. You know, we are at the end here. It's going to be over now. It's not this ongoing thing. And this third piece is this accessibility of crowdfunding. A lot of this sounds kind of like a very condensed capital campaign to people that have been in the nonprofit sector for a long time, where you have a definite goal and you know what you're trying to get together and all the rest of it, but instead of 18 months or 36 months raising millions of dollars, we're looking at how do we get people that would normally never participate in a capital campaign to come to the table and join this. And here's where this accessibility, this participation is easy for almost anybody comes in. If you can start with that minimum $10 donation and go up from there, almost anyone you know can participate in this and feel just as valuable for joining the effort as anybody else. You don't have to be $1 million donor or even $1,000 donor. That $10 donor can come in and not be kind of turned away, but also then we ask that $10 donor, can you contact your friends, your family, your folks? And it's, as Peter was saying earlier, it's an organizing strategy as much as it is getting that $10. And the dollar amounts that are on the slide right now from the first campaign looked at these online donors. We had more than 300 donors total, but 255 of them used the online platform, where 88 of those 255 came in under $25. And those people helped get the word out and generate excitement so that when other people came in above $50 or at $25 to $50 or whatnot, we were able to get to that $25,000 total goal there because those smaller folks didn't get turned away, and that was exciting for us.
And it doesn't hurt that when we write grant proposals afterwards,
right,
that we're able to cite how many people have already invested in our project, and it's a way of showing that there is community support for what we're doing.
And it's really hard institutionally in the old way to go after a $10 donor, but using the GiveMN tools, and we'll talk a little bit more about peer-to-peer work, then that doesn't fall on the institution to go after that $10 donation, and that really helps. So the next thing is sort of rewards or some acknowledgement of why that you've been a part of this thing. And when you think about crowdfunding in terms of the for-profit model, that usually means you're kind of pre-purchasing a thing. If you're crowdfunding a movie, you're getting a copy of the movie. If you're crowdfunding a new piece of technology, you're getting early access to the tech. But in the nonprofit world, we're usually trying to reward people's participation with some unique contribution or recognition for what they've done. This little slide here is from Peter's individual page in this most recent campaign, where at $50, he'll sit down and buy you a cup of coffee. You come in at $50, you're going to get personal attention from the co-founder of this library to talk about the work and be excited about it. And you can't really sell that, in a store. It's something that the campaign puts out there to say, we really acknowledge that even any dollar amount helps. $10 is a great start. But if you can come in a little higher and we can recognize that with something special, then it really helps. And I think that this last bullet on this page, that people that are supporting nonprofits want to be able to go to their friends and family and say, I kicked in for this thing that's really valuable to me, and I got a social media mention out of it. I got some kind of recognition that they were part of something important. And then I think lastly and most importantly in the terms of crowdfunding, that what makes this the most different from any other type of nonprofit fundraising is that it is very, very, very social. What we are trying to do here is not say, Eastside Freedom Library is asking you to join this campaign for support, but rather Peter Ratcliffe is asking his friends to do this. Steve Boland is asking his friends to do this. Beth Cleary is asking her friends to do this. And the ask is coming from a person, not an institution. And we're asking those people that are excited about it, that do give, to then share that to their networks too. Not only are you going to give us that $10, but you're going to tell people that you gave us $10, so when they hear about it one more place and one more time, it really increases the value of what is happening with the campaign. And there's lots of ways that nonprofits raise money through year-end letters, through major gift donors, all of these other sorts of things, but that tends to be institution to individual communication rather than peer-to-peer. And that's one of the most important pieces of this puzzle. So one of the things that we stressed in this as we're looking at how do you reach all those peers is we do know some people, but we need to ask them to go to their networks very specifically. And you do this way ahead of that 30-day kickoff timeline. And that's one of the things that's really been important in the work that we've done at Eastside Freedom Library is a long while ahead of actually launching the campaign, we've connected with individual friends and said, we'd like you to establish a goal of helping us raise some money by going to your networks. Here's how we can support you, here's the information you'll need, and all the rest. Dan will talk about that in a moment. But I think it's really important to understand as you're doing this, you don't just send a message to everybody equally in your whole network and say, please give, but rather shake through 20 or 30 key folks, depends on your organizational capacity, to ask them, we'd like you to set up an individual goal and go to your networks on our behalf. How can we help you do that?
Well, thanks. So I think the next section we're talking about here is really how to identify those best donors. Who are the people in those networks that are most likely to help you with the campaign? And ultimately the tool that we're going to use is the fundraiser page on GiveMN.org. It lets your friends, the champions for your organization, sort of toot your horn for you. As Steve has said, that peer-to-peer message is much more powerful than institution to individual. The fundraiser pages also allow you to give people a chance to create personal, empowering, and fun messages. They can, whether you're doing it as part of a formal campaign or whether you're offering it as an opportunity for donors to engage with you on their birthday or for their wedding or an anniversary, some kind of an office challenge. There are lots of creative ways to use the peer-to-peer fundraising tools on GiveMN, whether it's a formal campaign by your organization or just an opportunity for donors to be involved. But who are those folks that are best, and who is it that has the story? So this example here is actually a page that Deepta created for People Serving People. She's celebrating her birthday by creating a fundraiser page, and she has a passion for the work that People Serving People does. And if the print were big enough here, you would actually be able to read her story here. This isn't just a copy and paste of the About Us page from People Serving People's website. This is Deepta's story about why she feels so passionately about the organization and why she wants her friends and family that see this page to invest in a cause she cares about. So think about those people that really have interacted with your mission in a way that's truly personal and meaningful to them, and maybe they're the ones who are going to be your champions. Another way to think about it is those networks. This is, I use a tool called InMap, which is something that will look at your LinkedIn profile and make a little visual of all the people in it and how they're connected. This completely blows me away because I don't think I'm a very well-connected person. I'm an introvert. I don't, tend to my LinkedIn profile that much, but I saw this picture and went, holy cow, I want to know what each of those colors represents, and I had no idea that I had networks out there that were this interconnected. And then to see those big sweeping arcs go between networks was really shocking to me. So I think it just says that you would be really surprised to know how big the networks are of the people who are passionate about your work. And I would encourage you to tap into those as much as possible. We probably have no idea the power that those networks hold unless we ask. Another place to look for your champion donors is in your GiveMN donor report. So as you look at the donation details for gifts that are already coming through your page, look and see how many of those are recurring. You see the second column from the right there's got a recurring flag in it. If people are so passionate about your work that they're willing to give to you once a week, once a month, once a quarter, and have that gift, keep giving over and over and over again. In this example, there's a weekly donor here. It looks like who's giving $100 a week. That's a really significant gift to an organization. I certainly don't have that kind of capacity, but if I had that kind of capacity, I might also have that kind of passion. So those are the types of folks who I'm willing to bet if we ask that person what their story was, what is it that uniquely made them give that much every week, they'd probably be willing to share at least a part of that story with a broader public. And they probably already are. They're probably having, coffee dates talking about how, cool your organization is, and you just don't know it. So it's time to capture that and turn it into a revenue producer for your organization. And then finally, maybe using a thank you text on your page where you can customize the text that appears in receipts for all of your donors is an opportunity to ask them to think about creating a fundraiser page for you. So they've made one gift, they got the receipt for their donation, and now in that box where you can say thank you, you can also tell them about the opportunity to create a fundraiser page. So again, this would not be part of a big campaign. This would just be sort of an ongoing reminder to folks that if they're giving and they're passionate, there's ways that they can sort of grow their involvement with your organization by creating a page, and that's easy to do. So I want to talk a little bit about how it is that you can actually use the tools on GiveMN to start empowering those fundraising champions to be online fundraising champions for you. So the tools on our site they really allow everybody to create a page on your behalf. So the dollars will flow to your organization no matter what, so people don't have to try to collect money at the office or whatever and then make sure it gets to you by dropping it off on a Friday afternoon on their way home. By doing a crowdfunding campaign on GiveMN, all the dollars flow to you directly, and the donors just have to tell their story. They don't have to do any of the stuff, any of that business stuff. So when a donor creates a page, you will get an alert in your email that says a page has been created for your organization. You can also view that list of people that have created those pages for you in the administrative area, and both of those things allow you the opportunity to reach out to those champions. You get to say hello. You might provide them with some logos or the latest news from your organization. a few things that might be really compelling for them to add to their pages, in addition to their own story, like an update on the replacing the roof project, or how close you are to meeting your match from the Knight Foundation. Those are great examples of updates to send to folks to keep them in the loop and to also thank them. Mechanically, if for some reason a page is created and it just does not flatter your organization, if it's just completely off message, and you can't get a hold of that donor, there is a tool that will allow you to hide that page administratively. But I would always encourage you to reach out to those donors first that created the page. You don't want to surprise them and hide their page, because they are, I promise you, they're really well-intentioned people. Malicious folks don't take the time to create a fundraiser page for another charity just to tell their family and friends to give to a cause if they're not passionate. So reach out to them if for some reason you have questions about their page. The email address is right there in your administrative area, and that's how you can get a hold of them. You can also view their pages that way. So I think Steve and Peter are going to talk in a little bit about how to give your donor champions some tools and training, but I want to just really quickly walk through the steps here for creating a fundraiser page. And for those of you that are administrators of your GiveMN page, you'll see that the color is different. In this case, it's orange, not green, but almost every single function is identical. The layout's a little bit different. We put a better font on it because it faces the public, and it's painted orange, but other than that, the functions are the same. So donors can very easily log into an account or create an account on GiveMN. Once they've done that, they can click the big orange fundraise button at the top of the page, pick the organization from the list that they want to give to. This is an example of a page for GiveMN, where you see in step 1 we've identified the organization, and that's from a list, so don't worry, your organization is already in the list. People can't really screw that up. It gives the name of your organization, the city where you're located, and your EIN number, so folks can make sure that they're matching exactly to the cause that they want the funds to go to. And then they can name their page. You could name it anything you'd like. When we see organizations doing coordinated campaigns, maybe it's the fundraiser's first name and then fundraising for Eastside Freedom Library or something like that. You can always title those pages however you'd like. And then once the donor is inside their editing environment, you see they can add the exact same stuff that you can to organization pages. They can tell their story, they can do thank you text, use a fundraising thermometer, they can add a matching gift if they would like to personally match gifts, or if there's another way that they've secured a match maybe from their company or something like that. They can also add images and videos, just like you can as an administrator. They can add a logo for their fundraiser page that will show up in search. We've given them the same kinds of donate buttons that you have available that will link directly to their fundraiser page. And they can also view an abbreviated version of the fundraising reports, so that as donors are giving, they can actually see a list of the people that are giving to your organization through their page, so that they can reach out and do thank yous on their own if they'd like. They can embed the donation form from their fundraiser page on any page on the web that they'd like. So if they're running a blog and that's how they're sharing their passion for your organization, they can embed that form right there, and it will sort of match the style of their page. If you're working with people who run their own business, maybe they're a realtor or something like that, and they're really proud to associate their personal business with the fundraisers that they're running, maybe they can put this right on their business's site as well. There's a couple examples here of just some ways to use the fundraiser page, like this one for Caitlin Aiken, who was doing a readathon at her school. And her dad, full disclosure, used to work for GiveMN, so he's pretty good at this. He also runs a video business. So they had a pretty compelling little video here on their page. But they were able to create a fundraiser page just for Caitlin's readathon at her elementary school. There are also great examples of board members using the fundraising tools to create pages where they share their passion for being a board member for an organization, and they reach out to their professional networks and their personal networks. And I know Steve will talk more about that here in a second. Then there's one here that is actually from our Executive Director, Dana Nelson. She just created one for her birthday a few weeks ago for the benefit of her one of her children's charter schools. And so you see here she's created a page all about the really personal story and that their family has in relationship to this school and how great this school has been for her son. So there's a great story there. And then she shared it socially. So she put it on Facebook, where she got a whole bunch of likes and comments. She also put it out on Twitter, and she's a fairly connected person, so that got retweeted and liked by a few big influencers. and her network kind of caught fire, and in a good way. And the news got out, and if you look back at this fundraising thermometer here, she had a $450 goal, and she raised more than that. She was at $480 when I took this screenshot, and I think she got close to $800 by the time the campaign was all done, and she hid the page. So, you'd be surprised the power. Even Dana was surprised. She said, people usually, they'll take me out for lunch for my birthday, or they'll, send me a cupcake or something, but I wouldn't expect people to give to my kid's school. And she was really flattered by the response that she got. So, with that in mind, I want to turn it back over to Steve and Peter to talk about how they use these tools for the Eastside Freedom Library specifically.
Great. So I think maybe a little history on the Knight Arts Grant. Do you want to talk a little bit about the project?
Sure. So the Knight Arts Grant required that the money would basically go to artists. And so our role was to commission art that we thought could be permanently installed at the library as a way of signaling to the neighborhood that while this is still the building that they've known and loved, the purpose is shifting slightly. So we wanted to have a mural painted to go down the stairway and to thematically connect the collections that will be housed upstairs with programming that would happen downstairs. I've been teaching at this Roseville Adult Learning Center, and this Hmong artist, Jerry Yang, created a magnificent mural at that school using focus groups with immigrants from other groups as well as the Hmong. And I was knocked out by this mural and thought, wow, something like this and a process like this that involves conversations crossing boundaries among immigrant groups as a way of creating this visual representation of their stories. So that was part one. Part two was there are these strange architectural features in this 1917 Beaux-Arts building called rondelles, which I hasten to point out to people is not a singing group from Detroit. And some people look at these rondelles and think, well, was George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, were their faces once displayed? And in fact, these were always vacant spaces. And we had the idea that we would commission silk screens to express the organization's motto, awaken to the work of freedom for yourself and all beings, in 12 different languages. There are 12 rondelles, and so we wanted to start out in Ojibwe and Dakota and end with Hmong and Karen and Bhutanese. And so that was part two. Part three was that we inherited a building without any furniture, and we wanted to have tables custom built that would express in different ways the specific cultures of people who live in the neighborhood. And then lastly, the main floor of the library is a gigantic open space with wonderful shelving, but largely open space. And because the shelving goes up so high on the walls, we thought we wanted to achieve two goals. We wanted to create screens on wheels that would allow us to reconfigure the open space and also allow us to display visual art, because the walls are not really good for displaying visual art because the built-in shelving goes up so high. So we wanted to have these shelves built. So these were the four things that we asked for, and we asked for support to document the process that the artists would go through, conversing with people who come into the library while they're working, conversing with each other, and as a way of creating sort of an initial part of the archive that we want to build of people's stories in the community. So we came up with a budget with Steve's help of $70,000 total, and Knight offered us $25,000. We didn't say, you shorted us, come back to us when you're ready to give us the whole lot. We said, well, we'll take the $25,000. Let's try to raise at least the match, the dollar for dollar. And let's also try to go beyond that to raise the funds that enable us to do the documenting work that we want to do. And now we're ready to go forward and start to get those artists working and those conversations going, and document those conversations. And layer upon layer of what we want to do.
And I think it's important to mention that in the Night Arts Challenge, the first round of it was announced last fall, and we did try the traditional contact institutional philanthropy, large donors, see if we can get these dollars together. And as a very new institution, not yet a full year operating at that time, it was really hard to ask those folks to come in and match somebody else's money, which again is hard for philanthropy to do. They like to go out and tell you to get a match. They don't want to match somebody else's grant.
Right.
So as we looked at the crowdfunding campaign for this piece, the title of it really was Matching the Knight Foundation Arts Grant. It's that very goal-specific piece again. We're not just asking for operating support, but rather here's the project, here's the dollar amount, here's the time frame. Give people all that. But then we needed to go out and reach a network of people that could go out and reach networks of people, those peers that would go talk to peers. So that's kind of the next thing, I think, on the next slide here, is how do you recruit these team leaders? Who are they going to be and how do they go out? So this is actually a screenshot from the leaderboard of this most recent campaign, which is another function of what GiveMN is growing into with this space. More to come there, as I understand from Dan, as that gets refined. But you can see the list, and we had, I think, at the end of that 18 different fundraisers that were working on this project, going out to their family, friends, colleagues, whatever, and saying, what is it about bringing in newly commissioned art that reflects all the stuff Peter just talked about that's exciting or interesting to you? So when I tell this story, I talk about my grandfather, who was an East Sider, who was part of the 34 Teamsters strike, who was a huge influence on my life, but was very much still an immigrant to America at the time that he was founding his way through, and how much I've learned from his story about kind of how other families are doing similar things now. And that's the part of this that I want to talk about, right? Because that hits me. That's really emotional for me to talk about what it means to my family. And we asked 18 other people to go do that with their families, their friends, their stories, and had to help them through. So, Peter, can you just talk a little bit about how you decided who to ask?
Yeah, it's an important point, because so here we were doing our second crowdfunding campaign within the 12-month period. And some of the people that we had worked with were hesitant to go back and ask people again, because we had also asked people at the Give to the Max Day. And this is where the project specificity really comes in. So we thought, well, we wanted to lean towards people who had an interest in the arts.
Right.
The first time around, we were leaning towards people who had an interest in the project. We need to save this building. We need to replace this roof. You believe in what we're doing overall. Help us raise that money. So we looked in many cases for artists or people in arts organizations who would be particularly interested in this project of commissioning the art. And so I would say of the 18 team leaders that we came up with, probably a third were repeaters from the first time, and 2/3 were people that we saw as being particularly interested in this particular project. And I think that when we are a relatively new organization and just kind of building our base, as some of our board members and friends said to us, we don't want to wear out the people who have already shown an interest in what we're doing. And so it actually puts us in a position of having to continue to be imaginative in how to reach out, which is exactly what it seems to me you need to do if you're creating an organization.
Right. So that piece of we don't know who those art supporters are beyond the 20 or 30 or 50 or whatever. We don't know their networks yet, but the people that we're reaching know their networks. So we get to introduce ourselves to them. And back in the 20th century, we might have bought a list and mailed out costly paper and hoped for the best. And now we have this much better tool through GiveMN to be able to ask people to send these messages to identified supporters that they think are going to be interested. And it's not a cold call to somebody that doesn't know you, but an introduction from a friend to a friend. And that's really helpful. If you look at, I don't know if they can see this on the size of the screen you might be looking at, but the number 3 on this list, the project name is Hmong Archives. And you can name, your individual fundraising project, anything you want to name, but that particular person is a board member at the Eastside Freedom Library, but he's also the archivist that helped create the Hmong Archives, which is going to be moving into the building. So his real passion is we want that kind of art to be represented here. We want a place for our community to have access to these works. He's not telling the story about art in general or about the Eastside Freedom Library in general. He's telling a story about the Hmong archives. And that's what's going to speak to his community, the folks that he's reaching to. So it's really important to encourage your team leaders, be individualized. Don't just say the stuff that we say. Talk about what's important to you. So in creating that team and building stuff, I think one of the things we learned early last year when we tried this for the first time is Peter and his co-director, Beth Cleary, are really well-connected, super smart people, know a lot of folks, most of whom have never done anything like this before in terms of building a custom message on a web page. They know a lot of folks, and they know how to use email, and they know how to talk, but they've never done this. And as intuitive as it seems to me, using the tools, I feel very comfortable with it. Some of the folks that we were asking to do this were like, I'm not sure how to do it. And so we did a couple of things. One is we created just a Word document with screenshots that I literally, as you can see on this slide, put arrows in, saying the first thing you have to do is log in or sign in. If you've already got an account, just sign into it. If you don't have an account yet, create one. But you have literally give them a picture of the web page and say, this arrow right here, do this part next. And it helps people a lot to have that step-by-step feeling like we've created it for them just for this project that talks about what to do next. And those visuals helped. But we also did this in person. In both of these campaigns, we offered different times and days where people could just meet us. The first time around was at the Rondo Library, Rondo Community Library, because they have a computer lab, and we reserved the computer lab and just sat there with as many terminals as we needed. By the time we did the second one, the library was up and running and had computers, so we were able to invite people to come to our space. But if they don't feel comfortable with a paper guide, show up in person and we will sit down right next to you and help you with any questions you have and allow you some time to just type in your story. And that really helps people that are feeling uncertain or unsure to feel like they've got that support. Another just quick illustration on what to do after, because once we got some pages running, people wanted to edit them, and then that's different because now you've got to go to the My Account piece and find your existing page, and I'm like, oh, we didn't give you that the first time. So here's the big arrow pointing how to get to the My Account piece so you can make any changes later. And then as we're going through this process, we were really cognizant to encourage people, send emails as a really easy way to start. But also don't let that be the only thing that you do. If you can make some phone calls, great, but use your social channels to talk about this and encourage people. And this is a list from this most recent campaign on where did donors come from immediately. And as you'll see on here, there's an awful lot of referrals that came in from Facebook posts. And that's not normally where fundraising comes in for most organizations. If you look at your sources, it's going to come from email and all the rest of it. But because of peer-to-peer work, that social piece is just much more important and really helps drive donations. So you can remind people, don't just send the email, please do that, but also post to Facebook, post to Twitter, share it wherever you can share it, and help remind people that you're doing this, because it's going to take more than one reminder for a lot of people to make that donation.
Yeah. So this is actually a screenshot from the donation report that you have access to as an organization leader for the Eastside Freedom Library.
Across all of the giving that was happening for this particular campaign.
Yep. So all of the pages that are associated with your organization, every gift that comes in is recorded in this report that you can get to in the administrative area, where one of the column options is actually called referring URL. And that will literally give you the website address where the donor was right before or when they clicked a link that took them to the page where they made the gift for you. So wherever they were right before they were so moved as to complete their gift, you can actually see that on here. And in this case, you can use it to learn. You can also use it to sort of measure your campaign metrics and to see what sources are being successful that we're using as an organization and what is most successful for our fundraising leaders. You see on some of these here where it just looks like it's facebook.com and then it stops. There's no other additional detail there. That's because literally people were clicking straight from the news feed. So when a link to a fundraising page was shared in a Facebook update, hey, I really care about this, I think you should click here, and they literally paste the link. That makes it very easy for somebody as they're just scrolling through their Facebook feed to click that link and go directly to a mobile optimized site on GiveMN, even if they're on their phones, where it's really easy to give. So that's one tool that all of you already have access to behind the scenes that you may not know about.
So I think as important as it is to use the email part of this tool, because a lot of people think crowdfunding is all social. It's both and, not one or. It's really important. But we also wanted to use email to communicate success, so that those people that did give were able to feel like my $25, my $100 really mattered. And this is a screenshot of the monthly email newsletter that the organization does. That was sent out on July 1 because June 30th was the end of this particular campaign. So just a few days ago, we were able to acknowledge success in raising that match, which had been a long time coming, so we're very excited about it. A bunch of small donations that came in really helped, but this campaign also leveraged a couple of larger ones, which was unusual from the first campaign. But we've been around more, and then it was the crowdfunding effort that got us in front of donors who thought, I can do a lot more. And I don't know, Peter, if you have anything you want to add about that.
Yeah,
this time.
Right. I think that there were two individuals in particular who really became interested because of the crowdfunding campaign. And one wanted to give us a gift of stock, and the other one gives one annual gift to some organization that she selects. And so having the crowdfunding campaign and the variety of resources that we generated to support the crowdfunding campaign were really critical in gaining these two offline donations. And so it's not even an either or. It really is how these pieces fit together.
And I think it's really important to remind all the team leaders that some folks are not comfortable donating online yet for whatever reasons, and in some cases it's because they want to make a gift of stock, for example, and that doesn't translate through GiveMN. We can still record that through the functions of GiveMN to say that's offline gift also counted towards this person's individual fundraiser goal, and they can share that success with other people and let them know that if for some reason they prefer not to give online, they're still welcome, they're still encouraged. And in the case of people that want to make a substantial gift, in a way that really matters to them through things like stock, it's so important to be able to have the introduction from this tool that a friend told them how valuable this was. We didn't have one of those names for sure ahead of a friend reaching out. It was a board member in one of the cases that I know that reached out to this person and said, we think this is the right kind of project for you. And that individual came over to the library because they knew that they were capable of making a really substantial gift and they were going to want to invest some time. But because of the introductions that way, we got to the end of that campaign, and that was really exciting to be able to tell everybody all of those other little contributions really mattered in bringing in even more.
That's great. So thank you very much to both of you for your contributions. I'm going to switch over to the question slide here and wait a second while anybody out there sends their questions through the chat. While we wait for questions, and please go ahead and type those in as soon as you have them, I want to kind of put you guys on the spot and ask, so what's next for the Eastside Freedom Library? I mean, you just said, 8 days ago you wrapped up this campaign. What's next? What do you do now that you're 8 days out of a crowdfunding campaign? What's next with your donors, or what's next with your fundraising? Where do you go from here at the end of a campaign?
Well, I think that getting the artists working and having something very visible for people to see, and I think that we're thinking of both a Labor Day kind of splash that articulates our concerns with labor history and how labor history and immigrant history are interwoven. And it would be great to start to have physical evidence for people to come in and see. We're in the midst of this magnificent project of volunteers cataloging books. We have probably 16,000 books to catalog, and volunteers, we have 16 volunteers putting in between 8 and 12 hours a week, being directed by a guy, Bruce Wilms, who retired as the Dean of Library and Information Services at Metro State. So every day the shelves are looking different. And so we want people to actually come in the space and see the results of either monetary donations or the contributions of voluntary labor to get this space up to where we want it to be.
And I think quickly, let me add that we're meeting these people through friends, it's peer communication. So I don't think we can assume that because they gave because a friend asked them to, that they automatically understand or value everything that there is about ESET Freedom Library. So the next step really from a fund development communications point of view is inviting them to learn more, come to some events, participate, join the email newsletter. And if they say, I really only gave because I really, value this friend who asked me to, and I was doing it as a favor to them, we really want to respect that and not hit them with all kinds of other fundraising communication. But we also want to not assume that they wouldn't be great people to come to the events that we do and see this stuff in person and give them that invitation of how do you want to now be involved. So there really is an important communications follow-up back to people saying, we do have a monthly newsletter, we have a Facebook feed, we have Twitter. Please join us in those places and help us, and then we hope we'll start developing potential for additional donations over time. We certainly don't want to jump to that right away. We want to have that value conversation first.
Right.
So what's next for those team leaders, those 18 fundraising champions that you really engage in a meaningful and, in a lot of cases, deeply personal way in your campaign? How do you keep them involved in a way that takes advantage of the energy they're willing to share with your organization without, as you said, burning them out?
So we've just doubled the size of our board, and some of these people have become board members. We're thinking about other kinds of organizational structures to plug people in. And I think that actually being on the presenting end today, as I've been listening, has given me more ideas about, should we have T-shirts made for people, or we actually have a volunteer cartoonist who's working on a logo for us, but how do we begin to give them the kind of recognition that they deserve and at the same time then cement their connection to us? And I think I'm still learning. I spent 32 years standing in front of a classroom, and so this is a very different arena for me to be trying to be effective in. And it is, and I think, again, to go back to the way this whole process works, it is all about building relationships.
Yes.
So that's a great segue. There's a question here from somebody about those coffee dates that you promised.
Yes.
How many of those did you end up going on?
Probably 5 or 6 at this point. It's interesting that some of the things that we have offered, the first crowdfunding campaign, we said, if you give more than $100, give us the name of someone that you would like to honor, and we will start to collect their stories. And that actually very few people actually followed through on that.
Right.
And in a way, it's a shame. In a way, it's less work for me to do. But I'm surprised that you put something forward, but in fact, people are primarily about the giving and seeing the consequences of the giving than for whatever little perk. They may feel like they already get enough of me anyway.
Well, it sounds like that's a great reason then to think really carefully about what those rewards and sort of promises are, because if they're things that are a relatively low investment for your organization or for your time, and people are kind of, so-so on it, they still want to give, but they're so-so on the hook.
Yeah.
That's a great reminder to not add too much actual tangible value to that hook.
Right.
Don't offer them, a $20 book out of the library.
Right.
If that's not something that people are going to resonate with in the end anyway.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for an organization leader who is just beginning? So today is the first time they've ever heard of crowdfunding. This is the first presentation they've watched. What advice do you have for somebody that's just getting started?
Well, I really have to say, hire Steve Bowman. There are so many skills in this process of getting a new nonprofit up and running that I just don't have. And it has been so very, very helpful to have Steve. And maybe there are other people out there. I don't know who they are, and I can't imagine they're as good as Steve. But I'm a little reticent. If everybody hires Steve, I'll get less of him, which I would hate, because I like having as much of him as we're able to have. But the point is, get help. That these are very specific skills, that if we haven't had a particular career or lifestyle that through which we have developed these skills, don't let the lack of these skills hold you back. And there are consultants out there who are really quite reasonable in what they charge, and extremely helpful and it sort of enables me to do what I do best and not worry about other things that are equally and sometimes even more important, but it would be foolish of me to try to do them.
Sure.
So get help.
So Steve, I want to ask you the same question on the other end of the spectrum. For those expert fundraisers out there, or the folks who've been doing really good professional fundraising for a long time, and they're well-versed in how to run the annual fund and the telemarketing, and they're great, direct mail connoisseurs, they're getting into web giving, and maybe they're totally behind the idea of doing a crowdfunding campaign, but they've got to convince their board, or they've got to convince their volunteer base, or they've got to convince their staff that this is a good use of time. What advice do you have for those more sophisticated shops that haven't done crowdfunding yet to kind of make that leap?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that this tool will introduce you to donors that don't know you. That right now you can communicate with your email newsletter and your Facebook page and all that stuff, but that's only to people that have already found the relationship with you. And those are great people, but we can use this tool to ask them to introduce us to their family, friends, and broaden that conversation out with a lot more folks. And I think if the tool is thought of as like, we're going to put all this time and energy into getting $25,000, a lot of professional fundraisers will go, boy, that's a lot to just get $25,000 or $50,000. The hope really is, yes, this gets you some money, but it also gets you this invested crew of organizers, as Peter's word was, that are now advocates for your mission in way different ways, that will help out with other things in the future. And it's really important that as you do this exploration of what am I going to get out of this, and I talk to the board member that's reluctant, or I go to the ED that's not so sure, is to say this is actually probably the least expensive way to do prospecting that you can possibly imagine, because most of the work is being done by 20 or 30 or 40 volunteers that you have to train and help, but then they're reaching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on your behalf, and some of them are going to be like-minded folks that have the same vision and ideas about the world as their friends that already love you are, and you get this free introduction as a result of using this tool. So I hope that that's the thing that moves people forward.
Great. Peter, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
No, it's just been great working with GiveMN, and again, it's a universe that I had no experience with before. I gave occasionally, but hadn't thought about how to use these resources. And I think that, we really do have a base now after a year. Yeah. That is very exciting to have, and as we energize that base, there are further layers of people that they will reach. And we are looking forward to a major capital campaign when the building turns 100 years old, and we're looking at the need to raise $800,000 to $1 million to really put the building in the kind of shape that it should be in. And I think this is exactly the kind of base, even of $10 and $25 donors. In terms of social relationships, this is the kind of base that we need.
Fantastic. Those are great closing thoughts. Well, thank you to both of our guests for joining us today. We're just about to the top of the hour here, so I want to throw out a little save the date here. Make sure to mark your calendars with a big green marker for November 12th. That's Gives the Max Day 2015. And you'll be hearing more from GiveMN in the weeks to come about the resources we'll have for you and more details about Minnesota's biggest day of giving. So thank you all for tuning in.